All right, all right, all right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are when you start watching this. Welcome back. I am Blair Armstrong of Team Armstrong Coldwell Banker, located in beautiful Coachella Valley, but more so Palm Desert, California, Ironwood Country Club. I am a luxury specialist in residential real estate. And on my right, possibly your left, I never know how this turns out, and I keep forgetting. But Sean LaRue of Sean LaRue Home Loans, good friend of mine for multiple years. And basically, what is your title? I don't want to just call you Home Loans. What's a good title for you? I mean, you're a senior loan officer.
I'm a senior mortgage advisor.
Okay. So Sean's located in we're in this real world, living down in this area that we live in, and we get some monsoon weather. So I'm sure you have some nice humidity today.
Yep.
I want to call it beautiful Arizona, but I'm sure that it's 60, 70% humidity when about 120 degrees.
It's a cool 101 right now.
Oh, okay, not too bad today.
Yeah. I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'm back and forth to the Coachella Valley, my other home. I grew up here, spent about 20 years out in the Palm Desert, Indio area, and rocking the desert life.
So a lot of you guys have tuned in, tuned back and forth. If this is your first time watching us, typically we're talking about mortgages. Today we're going to throw a little bit different. We're not going to talk about mortgages. And if you want to learn about mortgages, you go back to our past episodes. We talked about FHA. We've talked about bridge loans. We talked about conventional loans. We've talked about bank statement loans. Correct?
Did I say that
right?
You got it. Yeah.
You got it right. Bank statement loans. And then also, I think what it always says, consumer.
The community lending program.
Community lending loans.
Yeah.
So we've talked about those. Those are in past episodes, some great information in there. So again, if you are looking for a loan or want to know some different ways to do that, definitely go back to our past episodes. My YouTube channel is Team Armstrong YouTube, and then Sean is Sean LaRue Loans YouTube as well. So anyway, what we want to talk about today, we were just kind of back and forth, is different things that we have found in home inspections that were like, what the heck? One of the little hurdles that we have that we don't talk about a little bit, because it's just kind of the way of when we're purchasing a home. I told you we weren't going to get any lawn equipment today, but now he's out there blowing grass. So
we had to say it, huh?
Hopefully it doesn't pick up very much. We'll play it by ear. Anyway, so you've been in the mortgage business for a long time. Obviously, you deal with home inspections a little bit differently than I do, but you still have to deal with them because it's a lending process. Why don't you start us off? What is one of the weirdest things that you have seen when you're trying to put together a loan and a home inspection comes back and you're like, oh my God, where did this come from?
I mean, just right off the top of my head, I mean, I was just dealing with one within the last 2 weeks, and the buyers were concerned right off the bat about the roof. And then we get into it, we get the inspection. There's obviously issues with the roof. And we got a $12,500 closing cost concession to help with their closing costs. And then they're like, well, why won't they help us with the roof? So it's just interesting, like setting those expectations with what could be potential problems. But then again, as we get into, what's actually going on with the property, it's always interesting to me. You were talking about like the DIY inspections earlier. It's just a trip at what kind of comes up. We were talking about mold inspections, things that you can't really see right off the bat. But properties in general, we're looking for potential health and safety standard issues for you to be able to move into the property. And so that has to do with inspections, or it has to do with the appraisal. And so the bank doesn't necessarily get a copy of the inspection, but we're obviously informed about inspections based on what the borrower concerns are, how we're communicating with our realtor partners,
Right.
and how the deal is kind of unfolding. But health and safety standards, we want to make sure flooring's done. Mold is always a big concern. It's a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
Health and safety, state requirements with carbon monoxide. But yeah, I mean, getting up in the attic, whatever you can find in the attic, rat feces, just all different kinds of things. It just really makes you wonder, like, is the juice worth the squeeze, or do I need to get a better discount? So
Yeah, I know that we did one a couple of years ago. Well, actually, not, I want to say a couple of years ago, a couple of months ago. We had one, the house was completely flooded. We knew that going in, and went through the process, going through, we got the inspection. Yeah, there was a water leak, and we kind of looked at it, and there's some different things. The walls were cut, 3 feet high, and ServPro came in there and did remediation. But I was looking at like, this is so weird. So the whole house is flooded. There's walls cut up, everything, but like countertops are still in the middle of the house. It's been sitting in water. Like everything else of it has been cut up to, but like they left this countertop and they're like bits of floor. Like, and so.
Oh, because they had to redo the island from the bottom up?
But the island was still there. And like, there's just different things, like cabinets where the water was, like the walls cut around it, but the cabinets are still there. Like, it was in my mind when they came in to do remediation. Oh, the cabinets are fine. Water just stop at a certain spot. So really, like, why I'm saying this is we kind of went through conversation, and even though that we have this remediation report from ServPro and everything's supposed to be fine, and like, I can't stick you guys in here until we do a mold test, regardless of what it says, regardless of what ServPro says, we've got it, we contained it, all this other stuff. Because there's still just a lot of different variables that just were not feeling right or looking right as well. So we did a mold test, and which they come in and they measure the air. Basically, what they do is typically for a mold test, for you don't know, is they go outside and they take a reading outside. And that gives them kind of what a count is. And your mold outside, the spores outside are typically a lot higher than they obviously should be inside, because you have filtration systems, so on and so forth. So they did that stuff, and they came in here, and it was just like off the charts. And realistically, what it came down to is we decided there was an avenue for them to come in. Okay, we're gonna come back and do more remediation. We're gonna move this, this, and this. But my concern was, at that time, it's been sitting in there for so long. Now you're in the ductwork of the HVAC system, and how does it ever clean out? Is there spores in there? Because there could be tiny spores that would not hit that reading right now that could grow and grow and grow and grow. And obviously, when you're putting cold air and it's a hot house, moisture goes in there, helps it spread. So it was this great house, great views. They were set. These guys were from Kansas City. They were really looking forward to it, and having to say, I don't feel right for you to move forward on this house was really hard to say. And we went in and found something else at a different place. But I always go back and wonder who actually even went back and bought that house. And I say that because I am the type of person that, even though that it's done, there's always going to be another house.
Yeah.
And that's a big risk, especially when you're coming up with mold of that.
It's okay to walk away. That's why we have
I know you love this house, but we can go find another one. We don't,
right.
Refund it. So that was one of them. I had another one that we walked into an inspection, and we were kind of doing some different things. We walked in this room, and can't see the floor, but just imagine a floor of a house. I got to try to figure this out here. Looking backwards. Anyway, looking at the floor of a house and through the carpet. So if this is the floor here, through the carpet here, I got to get my right stuff. I'm trying to find my camera here. Floor here, and about right here. This is say they're actually higher. I would say they're probably 2 to 3. It was probably about 2 feet high. Were mud tunnels, like termite mud tunnels. So they literally came up the carpet. And if you've ever seen termites, we have subterranean termites out here in the desert. They're not typically coming through the roof or from outside. So they're usually coming up underneath the ground. And if you buy a house in the desert and you get a termite report and it says they found termites, don't be weird about it. They're everywhere. And it's typically a real easy fix to it. But I'm just telling you the story because it was so bizarre seeing these little mud tubes that, well, obviously like this big, little chutes. They look, and I don't know what to say, but they're little mud tunnels that came up and sprouted off different ways. And we're like, well, that's weird. And first we thought it was a branch. We got it closer, like, oh my gosh, it was termites. Now they came back and fixed them. And how you fix them? They just basically drill down in the foundation. They dump all this poison in there, and they go around the outside of the house and they figure it out. That's good for a year, and they come back every 6 months to check them out. But that was a bizarre, and this was a high-end house. This was a multi-million-dollar house up in the hills here in the desert. You just things like that you never expect. But what we found out is these guys did renovations a couple of years prior, and they added on to the house. And one part of the foundation had this, must have had this little tiny crack in the foundation. And that's where they worked their way up through and came out. So anyway, that's just one of them. I have more. I don't know if you have any more from your kind of agents that you work with.
No, the one I keep thinking about is I was helping my brother. I was going to check out some houses for my brother when he was looking last year, and everybody notices something slightly different, and not only like the ducting and the AC, which is super important in a desert home, but like the slope of the roof and how it's connected, but also whether the foundation is cracked or not. And so it's just always interesting. Like inspections are done because it's all about what you don't see on the surface,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, you know, um, I have a really good buddy who's a home inspector, and he has a building background, and so he kind of like deconstructs it in his mind, and they know where to go and what to look for, and um, I think one thing that's really funny is like how everything's wired and
Mm-hmm.
how old the house is. What light switches are attached to? I think are the outlets flipped upside down if they're tied to the light switch, or like what's
Mm-hmm.
wired where, and you know and then getting into once you own the house, if you take the socket off, like what's actually wired correctly or
Mm-hmm.
ground, it could be a fire hazard. So um, I think inspections are kind of like sleep insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Pay for the inspection, do your due diligence. I think in 2020 and 2021 we were just really anxious for the investment and getting low rates that we waived a bunch of that stuff, but it's really back to basics, and we have these contingencies in place in order to protect our clients, but also negotiate a fair deal based on what and learn during the due diligence.
Yeah, one thing that we've started doing, and this is no, for if you're a home inspector watching this, is absolutely zero disrespect. But we give, um, so me and my other two agents that work on our team, we give our clients a couple of different options. We can go with a home inspection, it would typically cost you anywhere from $400 to $500, depending on the size of the house, maybe a little bit less. Or if you are open to it, which will cost you probably right around 2,500, maybe $3,000, depending again size of the house. If you are okay with that, Then we get a specific HVAC person, a specific pool person, electrician, plumber, roofer, all of those trades. We do this for the reason of this, is that a home inspector, which typically are licensed contractors somewhere around there, they give or some of them are not, just depending on what they are, but they come around and like, okay, this doesn't have electricity in it. You need to get a licensed electrician out here to check it out. And that's their job. So it really comes down to a liability issue. I totally understand the purpose of it is, but instead of having that, my clients that can afford it or want to afford it, they're like, yeah, let's do that, because we really know if there is an issue, not only we know that's an issue, but now we don't have to wait and find out how much it's going to cost to repair. So those are two things that we've done. Now, again, a lot of people are like, yeah, this house is great. Let's just give it a once over. If there's something in, we'll call that roofer in, whatever. So that's one thing that we do, that we found that it's been actually my client's life and stuff. At least they have the option. Here's a regular home inspection. They're going to find this, this, and this. And if there's any major hurdles, we're going to have to call out this, pool person or whatever. And that's been working out really well for us. It seems like the last couple of my clients have taken the latter part, which is we've got different specifics people out there, because then when we give them the home inspection from everybody, not only we do that for when we do the request for repair, we have exactly, okay, this is how much it's going to get costed. So the seller knows exactly where it's coming from, whatever. Now the seller has an option to say yes or no on the repair, or find out like, well, my guy can do it for this. Well, great, but it still needs to be repaired. So
I guess what's your thought if you're representing the buyer, if it was previously in escrow and you don't know the home inspector? Would you take that inspection as face value for what's going on? Is there a time limit? What's your kind of rule of thumb?
Yeah, I think that, depending on if it was done like 2-3 months ago, absolutely not. We're going to do a whole new one. If it was done like 2 weeks before, if it fell out for some crazy reason and we were on the backup, and we had the option of it. Now, that's another hurdle that we have to do. Sometimes people won't release that, or we'll offer, if we're having a hard time having them release that report, then we'll say, listen, okay, we'll pay you 50% for it. But if that's the case, let's say that they did give it to us, because that's a question that you asked. If they do give it to us and then we look at it, I'm just going to go, okay, this is a concern. This is a concern. I'll go back and look at everything. And I think that we should get somebody out here to look at this and this. Let's just go ahead and spend, we basically got the home inspection for free. So it's going to cost you $200 per tradesman for their hour to come out here and really look at it. But let's just get these guys out there. A GFI switch, to me, it's just not a big deal. Those are $2 to $5. Cost you $15.
Pick your battles.
Yeah, pick your battles, really. Because no house is perfect. Even a brand new house that you pick out is going to have issues with it. But really what we're looking for is structural type of stuff, which you talked about earlier. How's the roof? If we know that the roof hasn't been, if we're looking at a 30-year-old home and has a roof been done, nope.
Probably time.
Going to be time, and that's
or put it in your budget.
That's $30,000 to $50,000 right off the top. And are you going to get all of that? Sometimes yes, most of the times no, but maybe get a little bit of credit to get that done. One thing that we've done, this is kind of a word, especially with pools, and we've seen that, okay, it's older. Plaster pools, we're starting to see a lot of that now. They came back, 20 years ago, everyone got a plaster pool, and now everyone's getting PebbleTech. Plaster has a life of about 10 years before you have to get it done, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how it's maintained. But one thing that we'll look at is if we kind of see some that's starting to deteriorate a little bit, I asked to see the water bill.
That's a good point.
That's a big determination if there's a leak in there, because if the water bill is like,
I mean,
and
that goes
again,
for the whole house. I mean, there could be pinhole leaks or whatever
pinhole
anywhere,
leaks everywhere.
not just the
But
pool.
asking to see the water bill will be a big thing to it, because if your water bill's $1,000, there's a problem someplace. So we can do two things. We can get a plumber out there to do a pressure test on the
Hmm.
lines, and then they can really figure out where that's coming out. And then another thing too is, well, it doesn't look that part is, then we can call out a leak detection service, and they can come out and do a test. Now, those are not inexpensive, but
Definitely
replacing
worth it.
is expensive. So
Yeah.
a couple $1,000s when you're buying any home's any home is expensive, getting at $500,000. But if you get if you're at a $2 million house or a $3 million house or a $10 million house, whatever it is, and they have a high bill, those pools are typically, it's a lot of money to get done. Oh, got you back. I lost you. You're there. Anyway, with that being said, so that's one thing to look for. So if you are watching this and you're a consumer, or if you're even a buyer's agent or a seller, definitely take your clients out and just ask them to see the water bill. Some of you might do that. Maybe you're a newer agent, and is that something you think about? Because that's typically not in a home inspection at all. They're not going to say, well, the water bill is been $500 a month. You can really go back over a course of a year and kind of see what the average is, and you can kind of determine if it's a seasonal house or not. But if you're seeing some big spikes over the time, that's typically a seller is going to catch that. Sometimes it slips through the cracks. It's just another part of your due diligence, and it causes a lot. It saves a lot. But two is, if a pool is starting to deteriorate or the plaster's breaking down, the best way to do it now is Pebble Tech all the way. It's a 25 to 30 year lifespan on those bad boys. And we live in the world of, putting these pools in sand.
Yeah.
Regardless of how much rebar you have in there, once in a while things happen. So
yeah.
So those are the two things. I know that was a bit of a soapbox. I'm sorry about that, but those are just some.
No, I really like the point about asking for the water bill. Kind of getting an idea of what those expenses are going to be, or if there's any leaks before you're doing pressure tests. That was a really great point.
Yeah, and as Sean said too, ductwork's a big deal. We were in another, and you brought up another one. I'm glad that you say these little things that trigger my stuff, and all the homes that we've sold over the last couple of years, you kind of lose track. Pre-inspection, AC would be on in the house, and when you walk in this one room, and these people are like, okay, it's a brand new HVAC system, and everything should be good. And so we weren't really concerned. Like, well, that's awesome. It's a couple of years old, and it should be super efficient. We would go in this room, I'm like, there's no air coming on it. It's just super weird. And I'll finally get to, the home inspector guys to come out there. This was just a strictly home inspector. And what they found is that when they replaced the HVAC system and they upgraded some ductwork in there, they were going to seal one piece of ductwork to another new piece of ductwork, and they cut it and never replaced it. So for a couple years, and I don't know how these people didn't figure it out. Maybe it was for a couple months on the side. I can't remember that part, but the air was literally just shooting up into the crawl space. And so, obviously super easy fix, but that's the point of thing is that might have been missed in an inspection, because realistically, those guys are just going through a couple of registers and reading what come out of the gun. If they didn't hit that thing, we would have never known that. But it was just, those are the type of things, is really being involved in the inspection, checking stuff out. Most, if your agent should have been in at least 10, 15 homes, if they're a good agent. and really look at different things that don't, looking at baseboards, are they warped? If they're warped a little bit, that's probably have some water intrusion somewhere along the line. That's a concern. Go poke your finger down there. I've done that before. It's like, God, this is really weird. It seems really warped. And you go put your finger into the side of the drywall, and if it goes right in, like, well, that's not good. That happened to me, actually, before I was a realtor. We had a home inspection, and we knew that there was water leaking underneath the sink, and there was some formica in there, and we knew that, okay, it's like, okay, we got it cleaned up and all that stuff. Well, we went back to, we were just going to replace the board underneath the sink, right? Because we knew that that's where it was dripping. I'm trying to think of how that went to it. So when we went back there, we cut out the board, and I was like pushing against the back where the piping comes up, and my hand literally went through there. The bad part about that is that we went back to the home inspector and said, dude, it's like putty. Like, I'm literally stuck my finger through the wall. Because, well, I did a moisture test back there, and like literally impossible. So long story short is, we knew that it was a water intrusion. We had to rip out all the cabinets, which we were going to do anyway, just not at that time. So, and then we're like, well, gosh, if we're ripping out the cabinets, let's replace the flooring. We took out tile, and there was water underneath the tile. So long story short is, I could have gone back and sued this home inspector, but at the end of the day, we were going to replace the stuff anyway. It just put everything forward. But those are just some of the things. And two is, look underneath sinks, press on the back of the wall, regardless if they said they've done a moisture test or whatever. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. See if if it's kind of mushy, you've got some water intrusion somewhere along the line. Baseboards are a big teller on there. But yeah, so the list just goes on and on and on and on. Mold test. If you do have water intrusion somewhere, they're a couple $1,000, but it's your health. And if you're spending $500,000 on a home, then things are good to go. So I've been doing a lot of talking today.
This one was for you. I've been doing a lot of talking for the last few weeks. So
I feel like I'm the best.
Really great tips.
Yeah. Yeah,
really great tips.
That helps out. Hopefully, helps out a lot about what's going on in the home inspection world, especially out here. Really, it can happen anywhere. I know in different parts of the world they do. Dry rot's different in the Northwest than it is down here. Our dry rot is done with sun. A lot of times it can be repaired. We got some great repair guys that can go ahead and scrape out the bad part of the wood and then replace it and make it look like glue, or go back to do some different. But poke around. I think that's the big thing around it there, is make sure that your agent is there poking around. I know a typical homeowner doesn't know what to look for, so make sure your agent's there. I also think it's good during home inspections. If you are, now again, it's dependent on how much you trust your agent. But if you can make a home inspection, I think it's a good time. I also think it's a good time for the seller to be there. Someone's going to say, no, absolutely not, because they might say the wrong thing. We're doing a deal. We've got to be transparent. And I understand that. But it's a good way to make that connection, like, okay. And this is a conversation to be had. There's ways to work into this, but it's a good way for the buyer to go ahead and talk to the seller and get familiar. Where's the fuse box? How does this work? If this breaks down, where do I go by? Just to know the nuances of the house. So they're not coming in like, oh my gosh, we did home inspection, we got all this stuff. Now I don't know how this works, or something tripped on one of the breakers and I can't remember what breaker this was. So I kind of encourage that, but again, you have to judge of how the two clients are going to intermingle. And if you think it could be, I'm going to use this word, and it's probably the wrong word.
I think it also depends on the spirit of the transaction.
Yeah.
and pairing them together if it could be a potential issue.
It could be cantankerous. It could blow up a deal too.
Might be something, don't want to do. But I do like that, they're there for the home inspection, and the inspector and the seller and the buyer can all kind of talk about it, or at least come in at the end. Like maybe there was something that was complicated or unique or something. I think towards the end of the transaction, or the walkthrough, or after closing, it'd be cool if they could do like a walkthrough and get to know the house a little bit better. I know a bunch of them are like wired for entertainment centers and different things, and you can kind of figure it out. But every property has its own little things.
Yeah, I think that's, Sean, I think that you brought up a great point in there. Is one thing that we're really trying to get through. And again, it's depending on every sale is different, and regardless of how common it looks to, but every sale is different. But I do think it is good to kind of got to get back to, we've stated this in some other podcasts, is really having open conversations, being super transparent about stuff, and just letting people know. Because even if it was an issue in the past, if you let somebody know and you kind of like, hey, this is how we took care of it, that makes things a lot easier. Because regardless if the transaction's finished or not, and you've locked up, there's still stuff that can come back to you as a seller or a buyer on both sides. So it's just have that open communication as much as you can, and be transparent. We got the seller property questionnaire, the TDS, the transfer disclosure statement, which a lot of that stuff comes out to. But if you can get these guys to talk, or if you want to be, the buyer's agent, the seller's agents want to be the median of that, that's fine too. So I think that's one thing that we're missing lately is you don't want to let these parties talk to each other and try to keep stuff that's. I just don't agree with that. I'll just say that.
And if you're still watching, drop a thumbs up or a comment below on what your experience is, or what you might be concerned about as a buyer, or give us a unique situation or a photo of something that you saw. We want to hear from you.
All right, dude. Yeah, I know we're a little bit long-winded on that today, but there was some good stuff in there, so hopefully you can use that. But I think what Sean said too is so good too. If you have a different situation, or you're going through a situation right now, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you want a second opinion or something like that. I don't know how to, but any final words for you, sir?
I'm good to go. I think we covered it, and we had a lot of really great tips in there.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see each other next week. Same time, same bat channel, as they say. Until we see each other again, guys, stay safe, but most of all, God bless. Have a great day, guys. Take care.